Oh, so I. All right.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. 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 Ine matov u'manayim shevetachim atam yachad. Ine matov u'manayim shevetachim atam yachad. Matov u'manayim shevetachim atam yachad. Ine matov u'manayim shevetachim atam yachad. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Shabbat Shalom. So it's so nice. I welcome you that you are all here today, those of you that are joining us in person and those of you that are joining us on streaming. And as you can see, I am joined up here this morning, not by the rabbi, since he is celebrating a very special birthday back in the States with his mother. And we have Disha Shapukar this morning with us, and I'm very excited that she's here to help me out. And luckily we also have Eleanor, because it's always a lot more fun with Eleanor and a lot more pleasant to listen to her play the piano than definitely me, to say the least. I would like to ensure you that I'll announce pages from Mishkan to Tefillah as usual, and I'll try to remember to have you stand and sit down in the proper places. But if I forget to have you sit down, you'll notice if you're here in the sanctuary, Brina Taylor always knows when to sit down. But for those of you out there, you'll have to judge whether or not it's time by standing too long. And so I will try my best as we join together with an English reading on page 169. And please, everyone, this is a participatory service. The more we hear from you, the better. We have some of our adult bat mitzvah class here from last year, which I'm excited that they'll be reading Torah this morning. And now we'll turn to page 169.
It is not we alone who pray. All things pray. All things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays. Every creature and every living thing prays. In all life there is longing. Creation itself is but a longing, a prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon, and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind, and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the outpouring of boundless longing for God.
We turn to page 172 with Matovu. tovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael tovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Israel. We turn to page 173, and in the English, Tisha will read, "Blessed are you."
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware. We would lack the strength to sustain life before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength.
Baruch atah Adonai, rofei kol basar umafli lahasot.
Amen.
We continue on page 174 and 175 through 177 or 178 as we read the morning blessings together, interspersed with Elohai. Elohai, Elohai, Yeshama. Baruch atah ani bat chorinta. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozeh Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oteh Yisrael b'tifara. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Neshama, Shenatata bi, Shenatata bi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi, Baruch atah Adonai, Asher be'eno nefesh kol chai, ve'ruach kol basari. Amen. On the bottom of page 178 in Hebrew, we read our blessing for engaging with the words of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And on page 179 in the English.
Adonai our God, make the words of your Torah sweet to us, and to the house of Israel your people, that we and our children may be lovers of your name and students of your Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah li'amo Yisrael. We now turn to page 180 for Elu Devarim. And I'll begin in the Hebrew and we'll continue together in the English with Disha. Elu Devarim she'en lahem shi'ur, she'adam mochel pirotehem ba'olam hazeh. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are
Honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all.
We'll now continue on page 184 with Tov Lehodot. Rama. Yamad Yivarach Yerotev Yamlich Malchutei B'chayei Chonov Yomecho Uv'chayedecho Beit Yisrael V'chalav Yismach Karim V'himru Amen. Yehi Shir Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olam E'hamayah Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yidbar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitanlev v'yitanlal shemedi kudesham b'richu le'elam mikol brachata v'shirata toshvecha v'nechemata damiran v'yamah v'yiberu Amen. We rise together for our call to worship on page 195. We read in the English on page 195, in the Hebrew on 195, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mekadesh b'chol yom tamid, maseh bereshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, Kulam b'chokhma asita, mal'ach ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shebach ma'aseh yadecha, v'al meorei or she'asita yifa'arucha selah. Or hadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh kulanu mehira le'oro, Baruch atah Adonai, yotzer ha'me'orot. Page 198. Adonai Eloheinu, Hamalav Yedolam B'terach, Chamata Aleinu, Ba'avur Avoteinu, Ve'imotenu, Shebatku V'cha, Shebatku V'cha, Shebatku V'cha. Batelam Neimcho Kechaim, Eitechonenu Lamdeinu, Amrachem, Rachem Aleinu, Amrachem Aleinu. V'ten b'libeinu lehavin, lehavinu hashpil lishmo, B'Toratecha, B'Toratecha, V'dabek libeinu. B'mitzvotecha, B'mitzvotecha, V'yachid levaveinu, V'yavahu yira, Et shemecha, V'lo nevosh, V'lo nikalem, V'lo nikashel, Leolam, Leolam moed. Ki v'shem kodesh HaGadol, v'hanora, v'anachnu na'ila, v'nismecha, v'yishuatecha, v'havienu l'shalom, me'habakanfot haaretz, v'tolichenu k'hamemiyut le'artzenu. Ki amo yeshuotata, uvanu v'charta v'marta, v'keraftanu l'shimcha gadol t'ela be'emet lehodot lecha u'yachetcha b'yava. Baruch atah Adonai Abocher b'yamo Yisrael b'yava. Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. We continue with V'ahavta on page 201. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol miotecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha v'mlachtecha b'derech v'shokbecha v'vkomecha v'kshartam lehot ayadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha v'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. Please turn the page. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber habnei Yisrael, v'amarta alehem, v'yasu lahem tzitzit, al kanpei bigdeihem lidorotam, v'natenu al tzitzit hakanaf, b'til techelet, v'haya lachem letzitzit uritem oto uzchartem ekol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam v'lo taturu acharei levavachem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem Leman tizkeru pasitem ekol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, Le'olachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem Emet. On page 179 in the English, Adonai our God. Sorry, 203. Wrong page. I'm not that great at announcing pages without my glasses on. Maybe I should put those on.
Sing the song of men and women joined in understanding and respect. The song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come. The song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more. The song of a world redeemed, the song of peace.
Adonai, mi kamocha, netar bakodesh, nora tehilot, osefele, mi kamocha, alim Adonai. Shira chadasha shibhu, yeholim, neshim pasat, hayam, yachad kulam hodu, v'yiblihu v'yameru, Adonai malok le'olam va'ed.
Shira chadasha shibichu geulim,
Neshim pasat hayam, yachad kulam hodu, v'yiblihu v'yameru, Adonai malok le'olam va'ed. To Israel, whom Abiyazrak Israel, Uvedech Neomecha, Yehuda v'Yisrael, Lo Aleinu, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai,
Shmo.
God Yisrael.
Amen.
We rise for our central prayer, Tefillah, on page 205. Adonai, Sifatai Tiftach, Ufiagi Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Menorah, Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Atovim, V'koner Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, V'mevie Geola Libnei V'neiam, Leman Shemo B'yava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham B'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, B'chayei metim atah Rav le'Hoshia, Morid hatal, Mechaper chayim שמך בעולם. כשמש מקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב ביד נביאך וקראת אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מהדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישביענו ברחמיו לעיני כל החי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם. אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד קודשך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני הקדוש. You may be seated. We turn to Vishamru, which is found on page 210. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et hashabat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינופש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית English on page 211, Disha will begin with the meaning of Shabbat.
The meaning of Shabbat is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On Shabbat, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world.
Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
And we read in the Hebrew on page 212, Ritzei together. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'yamcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam b'ahava tikabel, u'ti l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yirah na'avot. And on page 214, we read responsively with Disha on page 214.
For the expanding wonder of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations.
Modim anachnu lach.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears but by our hopes, not by our words but by our deeds.
Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha uchana el lehodot. We continue with our Psalm for Peace on page 216.
Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu v'yakol, al kol Yisrael amecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, Yisrael, al kol Yisrael amecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, al kol Yisrael amecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom.
We now take a few moments of silence for prayer, meditation, or personal reflection.
Yulratzon imrifi Yulratzon imrifi Yagion libi lesanecha Adonai turi vegoali Oh, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart, be acceptable to you. Oh God, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom bimromah. Say shalom aleinu, ve'oko Yisrael, ve'imeru, amen.
So we now enter the central part of our service, which is found at the Torah service on page 244. This morning we have special people here because last year when the adult bat mitzvah class, B'nai mitzvah class had read, they had been recorded reading onto ahead of time because we weren't allowed to be together in the sanctuary. And so although we don't have all of our readers here today, we are blessed to have 3 of them. They read from Shalach Lecha last year, and they have the opportunity today to join us in person, which is extremely special. And so for those of you that are reading today, we have Marlene Smith, Carrie Cantor, and Frances Halperin. And it is a gift to have you here. And I know that very much Karen Weiss would have loved to have shared this day with you if she had not been in the States. But she sends her love, and she's very proud of each one of you. What was that? And she's definitely watching you guys read. Okay. So we begin the Torah service on page 244, and we rise.
Ein kamocha ba'elohim Adonai, v'ein k'ma'asecha, ma'avodecha malachut kol olamim, u'mamshaltecha l'kol dor ba'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai malach, le'olam avad, Adonai os le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, avarachamim et yevavetzonecha et Zion, timelech omot Yerushalayim, timecha levad matachnu, melech Avram v'Nisa, Adon olamim.
Page 247. I'm sorry, page 246. In this scroll is the secret of our people's life from Sinai until now. Its teaching is love and justice, goodness and hope. Freedom is its gift to all who treasure it.
Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, ki mitzion teitzei Torah, u'nevar Adonai miYerushalayim.
Page 248.
Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, le'amo Yisrael b'kdoshato. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Adonul Adonai iti, בשמיים ובארץ, לך אדוני הממלכה, יביט נעשה לכל לראש. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
Okay, we'll have to find it after. You may be seated. Maybe it's- This morning's Torah portion, as I had mentioned, is on page. Well, I didn't mention this yet, but I did mention that this morning's Torah portion is Shalach Lecha. It's from the book of Numbers, and we'll be reading this morning chapter 13, verses 25 to 33. And they can be found on this reading can be found in the New Revised Plaut on page 981, and if you happen to have an old Plaut, it can be found on page 1109. So this portion, in summary, speaks about the 12 men that are sent from Moses to check out the land of Israel before the people journey there. And 10 of these men come back with a mixed report. And they say that the land is very good, and the people are giants. They look like grasshoppers. So the people are giants in their cities and will be impossible to conquer. So not such great news. The other 2 men, however, Joshua and Caleb, say that with God's help, everything will be fine. But the people are so scared of what they've learned that they beg to return to Egypt. Remember, they were slaves in Egypt. So God becomes very angry at the people's lack of faith and threatens to destroy them and to start again with Moses. And Moses prays on behalf of these people, and he prays and and then finally God relents. And he decides instead that the people must spend 40 years in the desert instead of entering the land immediately and directly. And I must say, when reading this morning's Torah portion, I was reminded when I was thinking about this yesterday, knowing that this was the Torah portion this weekend, that I felt how much it corresponded with how I felt when I heard an announcement made yesterday that Roe versus Wade would be reversed, because I felt like we were going back 50 years. I would feel remiss if I were not to mention this decision that was made. Shalach Lecha is a portion in which a majority of men make a decision that sets a community back 40 years. Just as yesterday's Supreme Court decision, a majority of men made that decision, just like those 10 men made the decision that got those 40 additional years in Israel, in wandering before Israel. Judaism does teach, however, that time is not linear but cyclical, and that progress can come not in a straight line necessarily, but with twists and turns. And we step back and we can step forward. And today, although maybe a day of mourning and despair for many of us, it's also a call for us a call to action, and a call for the rights and autonomy for all. Although this did not happen here, as you know, that your clergy here are American, and so this directly affects our families, but I also feel it affects our lives. And as I shared last night, several years ago, I had a friend share with me just at the beginning of where it seemed like this could become a possibility. She said, I can imagine a couple years' time that there'll be women lining up at the border from America, from the US, that are refugees to get into Canada for an abortion. And as I said yesterday, I said that I had shared at that time, no, that's not gonna ever happen. And yet it did. And maybe it's the attitudes of that will never happen that get us in trouble. And so this really needs to be a fight. It has to work. We have to work against this change. I can't fall back into despair. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that luxury as a people that fight for human rights, that fight for a movement that's based on social action and tzedek. We have to come back with a different report, and we must do tshuva for what's been. We have to rethink institutions and powers and to do things that maybe we would have not thought to get involved in before. Because that's really the way that we can get into the promised land, or get back to a promised land. And I was reading, trying to find some source of inspiration for this morning, because as I said, I don't like to necessarily end on a negative note. I want to give hope. I always want to be able to see whatever the issue is from different sides, but more so for inspiration and to be able to provide some spiritual support. And so as I was looking through a reading I had found, actually, because this week we welcome Rosh Chodesh, it's the benching of Rosh Chodesh this month of Tammuz, and so and this is a good publication to know about. It's called At the Well, and it's published every month. And it speaks of, each month there's a different topic, a set of topics and activities that are offered through programming of these Rosh Chodesh groups that sometimes take place together, or just individual reading, which is what I had done. I was reading this, and I found there to be some sort of comparison in the way that it pulls together an idea of giving us a way forward. So I'll read Jamie Yael Katz wrote an invitation to create Seeing in the Dark. Tammuz is a month of contradiction. The feverishly anticipated start of summer, long days and nights for a gathering and celebration, soon tempered by our long memory as we usher in the 3 weeks of mourning, beginning with a fast on the 17th of Tammuz, and culminating in the 9th of Av, the destruction of the temple. In our frenzied media-consumed world, we often take sides. We are a culture that struggles to hold seemingly opposed feelings or elements in our hands at the same time. But Judaism is always asking us to practice this, particularly when it comes to making space for joy and grief. We remember so we can imagine. Each month, each festival and observance offers us its own lens for viewing the ancient and divine challenge. In Kabbalah, each month of the Jewish year is associated with a letter and a quality or sense. The letter of Tammuz is chet, and the sense is sight. Many years ago, I remember going on a night walk with a guide in the Negev. He left each of us in separate spots to meditate or pray. It was very dark, but there was also the most incredible night sky, filled with limitless stars. We were supposed to feel lost, to be able to notice the rush of insecurity while trusting that we'd be found. I remember waiting for my eyes to adjust to both the inky blackness and to the fractured light above me to find a feeling of safety and faith. In Tammuz, we practice learning to see in the dark. We sit up waiting for the colors of the late sunsets while also anticipating the arrival of a collective sadness. We remember that chet is the first letter of choshech, or darkness. One of the 10 plagues we recall in our Passover Seders, Chosheph, is grief, despair, and disappointment. But Chet is also the first letter of Chaim. Darkness can be a precursor to life and creation. Even if it is difficult and painful to see in the moment, moving through the dark, we must keep alert, searching for the sparks to light the next step, while acknowledging exactly where we are. And so today, this Shabbat, I ask that we all acknowledge where we are, and yet we also look forward through the dark and find a way to find meaning and to be able to have action despite what might be despair. So we continue this morning. I'd like to call up our readers and Yahamot, Marlene Smith, Malkabad Yaakov Veketol. Davina Kanowitz will be our first reader, Gershona ben Shalom Vepasha Rishon. If you give me 1 second, I'll just point to where it is. Do you know where you begin? Shame up there, all the way up there. Do you see it? Or that's not one. Sorry, you begin at the bottom. You're the bottom. There we go. Lamakom, right?
No.
Or Yashuvu?
Yashuvu.
Okay. Do you remember that?
Yashuvu mature.
I know what it is. I have it right there. But here it is.
Yes, thank you.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch L'Olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Na Leheni Melech Haolam Asher B'chabani Mikol Amim V'Natalanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Okay. Yashuvu mitur haaretz miketz 40 yom. Yahu yavod el Moshe ve'el Aharon ve'el kol adad b'nei Yisrael el midbar paran kadesha. Ve'yashuvu otam davar ve'et kol ha'ida ve'yarum et pri ha'aretz ve'yasapru lo ve'yomru banu el ha'aretz asher shlachtanu v'gam zavat chalav u'dvash hey v'zeh pirya. Sorry, Richard.
It's really it's beautiful for time.
Baruch Atah Adonai Leheni Melech Haolam Asher Natalani Torah Temet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yeah, Yisher Koach to Marlene Smith. For our second reader, call up Carrie Cantor. Talia bat Avraham v'Sarah Shehini. Yahamon Yitzhak ben Ariah v'Leah Shehini. And we call up Paul Pejawa for our second Aliyah. Do you know where you want me?
Baruch Hu et Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Ephes ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz v'ha'arim b'tzurot gedolot me'od v'gam yilidei ha'anak ra'inu sham Amalek yoshev be'eretz ha'negev v'ha'chiti v'ha'yevusi v'ha'emori yoshev v'ha'kna'ani yoshev al ha'yam v'al yad ha'yarden v'yahas Kalev et ha'am el Moshe v'yomer alon alef v'yarashnu otah ki yakonu chalam.
Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat Amen, v'hei ha'olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. These are cute.
Ta'amot vegabat baruch vesura devora shlishi. For our Torah reader of the third Aliyah, I call up Frances Halprin and Moshe. Yamod Moshe Aaron ben Shlomo veruch shlishi. And our Aliyot will be read by Morris Maron. I was going to say, you want to get you the stool?
Baruch et Adonai Barach. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
V'ha'anashim asher alu imo amru lo nuchal le'alot el ha'am ki chazak hu mimenu vayotziu dibat ha'aretz asher taru ota el b'nei Yisrael lemor ha'aretz asher avarnu va laturota et ochelet yoshvei hahi v'chol ha'am asher ra'inu betocha anshe midot v'sham ra'inu et hanfilim v'bnei anak min hanfilim v'nehi v'einenu k'hagavim v'chein hayinu v'eineihem.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam atah b'tocheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Yisher Koach to all of our readers. And we now will lift the Torah. And I'd like to call up Serge Adams to be able to do Chagbah.
V'zot haTorah asher saposha livnei Yisrael al pi Adonai
We now turn to page 253 for Amisha Berach. If you have the name of a loved one of whom our healing prayer may bring comfort to, you may say their names out loud or hold them in your heart at this time. We'll sing together Misha Berach.
Misha Berach, Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yevarech, Lerabel, Aholim. Misha Berach, Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yevarech, Lerabel, Aholim. Elna, Rifana, Elna, Rifana, la. Elna, Rifana, Elna, Rifana, Misha Berach, Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yevarech, and Aholim, Elna, Rifana, Elna, Rifana, la. Elna, Rifana, Elna, Rifana, Misha Berach, Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yevarech, Lerabel, Aholim.
We now have the reading of our Haftarah, which can be found on page 999, and I invite Alan Dessau, who will be our reader this morning. If you're using an old Plout, you can turn to page 1263 and the new Plout 999.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'nviim tovim beretzav v'direihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai havocher b'Torah u'Moshe abdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nviei hamet v'tzedek. The men said to her, "We give our lives for yours, as long as you do not betray what we've been doing. We shall treat you well and faithfully when the Eternal gives us his land." Rahab lived in a house built into the city wall, so she let the men down from the window by a rope. She said to them, "Head for the hills so that the pursuers don't run into you. Hide there for 3 days until they come back, then go your way." The men had warned her, "We shall be free of the oath you made us swear, unless, when we invade the country, you tie this cord of red thread outside the window through which you Now stand. Bring your father and your mother, your brothers, and all your family together in your house. Then anyone who goes out of your house must accept the consequences. We shall not be responsible. But if any harm comes to anyone who remains in your house, we shall be responsible. And if you tell anyone what we've been doing, we will be free from the oath you made us swear. Just as you say, she had said. She sent them on their way, and when they had gone, she tied the red cord to the window. They went straight to the hills and stayed there 3 days until their pursuers, who had searched all along the road without success, returned to Jericho. Then the 2 spies came down from the hills, crossed the river, and went back to Joshua. They told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Eternal has put the whole country in our hands. All the people there are scared to death of us." Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol halamim, tzadik b'chol hadarot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'yoseh, ha'mdeber u'mkayim, shekol devarach, emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'devarecha midvarecha, echor lo yeshuv rekam, ki melech ne'eman rachaman atah, baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarach. Rachem otzion ki hi beit chayenu, ve'lahu bat nefesh toshia, bimheira v'yameinu, baruch atah Adonai, mesamech Sion b'manecha. Samchenu Adonai Eloheinu, be'liyahu hanavi avdecha, u'malchut beit David Mishiecha, bimheira yavo, v'yagel libenu, al kiso lo yeshar, v'Elohim ha'od ha'arim, et kivedo, ki v'shem kadshecha nishbata lo, shelo yikbe nero le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen David. Al HaTorah, V'al Havodah, V'al Havim, V'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh, Shenatata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu, L'Kedusha v'Linuha, Lekavod Ol Tifaret. Al HaKol Adonai Eloheinu, Anaknu modim lach, uvarhim otach, yitbarach shimcha, befi kohai tamid, leolam va'ed, baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
And as I invite the reader of our prayers for our congregation, prayer for our country and the land statement, Adele Hyman, and also the prayer for Israel and the prayer for the IDF will be read by Judith Roth. I thought I'd also point out just the connection between the Haftarah and the Torah this week. And this week's Haftarah, as you heard, told the story of the spies that Joshua sent out to scout the city of Jericho prior to the Israelites' invasion of the Holy Land, which is what is in common with this week's Torah portion reading, because that discusses the 12 spies that were sent by Moses years earlier to explore the Holy Land. And so that is why we read this particular Haftarah today. And so I'd like to invite up Adele Hyman, and we turn to page 258. She'll read the prayer for our congregation, the prayer for our country, and our land statement.
source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us: love of Torah, devotion in prayer, and support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadcha bir'an min ha'avod. Prayer for Canada. Guardian of all life, may our nation always merit your protection. Awaken the spirit of love, peace, and friendship among the inhabitants of our country. Purify our hearts from any hatred and enmity, any jealousy or prejudice. Plant wisdom and virtue in the hearts of our leaders, that they may govern with justice and compassion, so that Canada remains true to its values and stands as a strong model for other nations. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those in need. Keep us alert to the care of this country's natural and human resources, and help us all to appreciate the plurality of Canadian ways of living and our varied paths towards seeking meaning. At Temple Har Zion, we acknowledge that we are situated on traditional territories and treaty lands, including those of the Mississaugas and Credit First Nations and other indigenous peoples. As Jews and as a community, may we always strive to fulfill our Jewish value of tzedek tirdof, the pursuit of justice in our society. We pray for healing in the communities and families of all who experience residential schools, comfort for all those grieving, and strength to all who pursue reconciliation. Amen.
And I call up Judith Ross, who will read the prayer for Israel and the prayer for the IDF.
We pray for the land of Israel, all its soldiers and all its people. May its borders know peace, its inhabitants tranquility, and may the bonds of faith and fate that unite the Jews of all lands be a source of strength to Israel and to us all. God of all lands and ages, answer our constant prayer with this Sion once more aglow with light for us and all the world, and let us say, prayer for the IDF. Bless the soldiers of Israel's defense forces and everyone who stands guard in order to protect our people. May God protect them and save them from all troubles and afflictions, from all sickness and injury, and send blessings to all their endeavors. May the words of the prophets come to fruition through them, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. And each one shall sit under the vine and under the fig tree, and none shall be afraid. And let us say,
Before we return the Torah to our ark, we'll have the prayer for Rosh Chodesh that begins this week. יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו שתחדש עלינו את החודש הבא לטובה ולברכה. Page 261. שתחדש עלינו את החודש הבא לטובה ולברכה, ותיתן לנו חיים ארוכים, חיים של שלום, חיים של פרנסה, חיים שתהבנו אהבת תורת ויראת שמיים, חיים שימלאו משאלות ליבנו לטובה. Amen. Our God and God of our ancestors, may the new month bring us goodness and blessing. May we have long life, peace, prosperity, a life exalted by the love of Torah and reverence for the divine, a life in which the longings of our hearts are fulfilled for good. Rosh Chodesh Tammuz yeh b'yom revi'i. The new month of Tammuz will begin on Wednesday. Now we'll return our Torah to the ark as we rise and turn to page 256. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki niskav shemo levado.
Odo Alaretz Vishamayim Mayorem Eren Liamu Tehina Lechol Chasida Givnei Yisrael Am Kerovo Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al ta'azovu. For I have given you good instruction, do not abandon my Torah. It's chaim hi, la'machazikim bo, v'tom le'ah be'oshar, dera'cheha, dar'chenom, v'chol netivoteha, shalom. Hashimeinu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu, Hikadem. We remain standing as we turn to page 282 for Aleinu at the bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach Adon hakol, ha'tek gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, v'lo zamanu k'mishpachot adama, shelo sam chalkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chavonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim modim, livnei melech malchei hamachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shehu notei shamayim ve'yosei haaretz, u'Moshe v'Toro b'shamayim imaho, u'shchinatu zo, v'govei meromim, u'Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Emet Zulato, Kakadu b'Torato, Yadad hayom ve'hashevota elevavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, Hashamayim imaho, v'haaretz b'tachat Einod. Page 287 in the English. We read together, may we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'ne'emar b'Adonai lemelech hakol haaretz, bayom hahu ki Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. You may be seated. On page 289, in nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision or grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair. In God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love we comforted. O life of our life, soul of our soul, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. At this time, our congregation extends its sympathies to our members and their families who have suffered a recent loss. Alan and Julia Spurgel on the loss of their father-in-law Gordon Dean Spurgel. Fran and Stephen Isaacs on the loss of their sister-in-law Marion Santer. Rachel and Jordan Zweigman on the loss of their father and father-in-law Edward Nelson. Zelig and Marianne Greenberg on the loss of their brother and brother-in-law Gerald Greenberg. Karen Tabachnik on the loss of her father, Charles Tabachnik. Bonnie Ushbrach on the loss of her husband, Philip Ushbrach. We also remember those whose yurtsites are this Shabbat: Max Mazel, Florence Rowe, and Jack Rosen. And for those that have perished in the Holocaust, we remember the Jews from our adopted town of Michlei, Czech Republic: Adolf Loos, Edvard Förster, Ella Försterova, Robert Frank, Hildegarda Frankova, and Kurt Freund. And if here or at home you have an additional name you wish to share, please share that name now as we ask those observing Shiva, Shloshim, and Avalut, the year of mourning or yurtzeit, to please rise. We also ask the congregation to rise and join the mourners in love and support. We think too at this time of those members of our armed forces who have died fighting overseas, of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael who have died in so many wars and attacks, and on all the innocent people of this world who have lost their lives to violence, conflict, hatred, the chaos of nature, or neglect, as together we pray. Yitgadal, v'yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad divarach hirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon, uv'yomechon, uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach leolam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha barichu. Le'ela minko berchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imeru. Amen. Osei Shalom B'mromav, Hu Ya'asei Shalom, Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imeru. Amen. You may be seated. And at this time, I'd like to call up Brina Taylor to make a few announcements. And while Brina's coming up, I'd also like to thank again the entire B'nai Mitzvah class and all of those that have read today and have had honors. I'd like to thank Marlene Smith, Carrie Cantor, and Francis Halpern for reading Torah, and the aliyot the blessings that were read by Gavin Kanowitz, Paul Pijau, Morris Maron. And of course, our Haftarah reader, Alan Dessau. And now I'll turn it over to you, Brina.
You stole my line.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I feel like I'm in Good Will Hunting. The end of that movie. It's worth watching that movie. On behalf of your board of directors, Shabbat Shalom. Morning Minyan services are held via Zoom Mondays to Fridays at 7:15 a.m. and on Sundays at 9 a.m. in person and via Zoom. It's the last chance to purchase tickets for our golf raffle. It's the Silver Jubilee of our annual THZ Dick Grimm Memorial Golf Classic, and the prizes are better than ever. You don't have to golf to win more than one of more 50 fabulous prizes. Please check out the link in Thursday's e-blast to purchase tickets, or go to heartzion.ca/golf. Monday at 10 a.m. in-person yoga with David Kendall. This program is open to everyone. Members and non-members, registration is required. Tuesday at 7:30 p.m., book club, Joy Comes in the Morning by Jonathan Rosen. Friday services starting next week, weather permitting, will take place in the garden. Please note that these services will not be live streamed or Zoomed. For links and other events, please refer to our e-blast or go to heartzion.ca. Check out our Facebook and Instagram pages for more great information. Welcome to our visitors. If you're interested in learning more about Temple, please see me, Morris Marin, or Cantor Lippman after the service. Please place your prayer book under the chair in front of you before you exit the sanctuary, and join us in the social hall for Kiddush and Motzi following the service. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And Isha for helping to lead the service this morning, and it's so nice to have her back, and thank you to Cantor Lippman for inviting her to help share the Bima with you today.
Thank you. And I just want to congratulate also Disha had just graduated from college and is on to university this year. And so that's a big mazel tov, and she continues to help us out here at Temple Heart Zion in the Hebrew School. She's an amazing woman, and I'm very proud to have her up here today. And I'd also like to thank Eleanor and for joining me always and your beautiful voice and music that you...
I'm going to thank somebody while we're thanking.
While we're
You
thanking.
know when you go to a Billy Joel concert and he's sitting there playing and people are singing his song?
Yeah.
I think, what a thrill to write something and have people singing your song. So thank you for singing my song. But somebody out there, you're singing my Kedusha. People are singing my Kedusha. I felt like Billy Joel. So, I was so
You're the
honored.
equivalent of Billy Joel for the Jewish
Yeah,
world.
honestly, so thank you. I was really honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And before we go to Adonai on page 321, thank you, Brina Taylor, and to Serge Adams, for both of you always helping us during our service as Gabayit and as on our making this possible for us to be heard on streaming and our audio. And now, 321, Adon Olam, and please join in. It's a responsive one. Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah,
Asher Malah,
B'terem Kol,
B'terem Kol,
Yitzir Nivra,
Yitzir Nivra,
Li'et Nasa,
Li'et Nasa,
V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Adon Olam, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, V'yacharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Yimnok Nora Adon Olam, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hodeh, V'hu Haya V'tifara Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, B'tzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, V'hu Echad, V'hein Sheni, Laham Shelo Li'achmira Adon Olam, V'li Reshit, V'li Tachlit, V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra, Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, V'hu Eili, V'chai Goli, V'tzorchach li V'yetzara Adon Olam, V'hu Disi, Humanos li, V'nachkosi B'yom Ekra, Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam, V'yahado Hafkid Ruchi, V'yet Tishan V'ha'ira Adon Olam, V'him Ruchi G'v'yati, Adon Ali V'lohira, Adon Olam. More time, Adon Olam, Asher Malah, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chef Lakol, Azai Malach Shimon Yikra, Adon Olam. Shabbat Shalom.
you.